Hello and welcome to the WRAP, WRAL's political podcast. I am your host this week, Will Doran, and I am here with my colleague, Paul Spey. It has been just a bit of a busy week in state politics, national politics. Absolutely. This is our first episode since Joe Biden announced that he was dropping out of the presidential race. But we've had a busy time in state politics as well. There are multiple lawsuits targeting the State Board of Elections. The wife of the lieutenant governor and GOP nominee for governor, Mark Robinson, is being asked to repay over $130,000 to the state government. But we'll get all that later. First, let's talk about the presidential race. Biden's out. Looks like Harris is going to be the one to get it. We're recording this on Friday. Former President Barack Obama endorsed her. She's lining up endorsements from plenty of other political figures. The state Democratic Party has unanimously decided here in North Carolina that they're going to give her our delegates when it gets to the convention in Chicago next month. So it looks like it's going to be Harris. Have you heard anything different?
No, and I don't see anything that could stand in her way at this point. The delegates are she has a majority, I think I saw in the headlines. There's no other candidate, to my understanding. You know, that we saw some headlines out there about Joe Manchin potentially rejoining the Democrats, the Democratic Party, which he left apparently. But that is going to amount to nothing. So it's going to be Harris, and Donald Trump was here in Charlotte this week, and he used that. It was his first rally since being shot at. To attack Harris, and, you know, of course, called her an ultra-liberal and went after her record on abortion and health care and immigration. So he's his new target, even if she doesn't become the nominee.
And you know, the ultra-liberal, label, obviously Republicans launched that at basically any Democrat. But for her, I think it actually does have some sticking power. I mean, you look at, some of the organizations that rank U.S. senators, and during her tenure in the Senate, she was basically the most liberal senator in the Senate. I think she was number 2. I think Bernie Sanders rated as more liberal, but other than Bernie Sanders, she was right there on the left wing of the Democratic Party.
Right, and one wonders if that just comes with the territory out in California. If you want to become the state's U.S. senator.
Yeah, you represent your constituents and what they want, and everything we know about California says that it's pretty left. So that brings us to the VP rumors, and who is she going to pick for her VP? And one of those names is North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, who is certainly from the more moderate wing of the Democratic Party. I don't know that anyone would call Cooper a straight-up moderate, but he is certainly no California liberal.
No, he I think one description I've seen used is he has a moderate tone. And, one reason he's been able to avoid labels, or at least the perception of being too liberal, is that, he hadn't had much chance to make any laws here in North Carolina ever since he's been governor, and he was first elected in 2016. The Republicans have controlled the state legislature, and so they decide what bills actually go through and end up on his desk. And obviously he vetoes things pretty much along the Democratic Party line. But it's hard to, interpret where he falls on the spectrum just based on that alone.
Exactly. He has no real power as governor. Really, the only thing that he can do as governor is to recruit businesses here. That's really been his main win as governor, is on the economic development front. And we have done quite well. I mean, there's a multi-billion-dollar Toyota plant getting built right outside of Greensboro. There's an electric car company, VinFast, building a big plant down in Chatham County. There have been new factories popping up out in western North Carolina, eastern North Carolina. We have had a lot of successes in the economic development world. Of course, Republicans will say that that is due to their policies of cutting taxes, cutting regulations, and that is exactly what I heard from Jason Simmons, the head of the state Republican Party. When I asked him about the Cooper VP rumors, he said, well, Kamala Harris is free to pick him if she wants to, but, his signature accomplishment is because of us Republicans in the state legislature, and we will be sure to note that. frequently if he is the VP.
And I would say I'm not sure that would be his signature accomplishment. Obviously, he was elected in 2016, back when HB2 was a thing. Remember, Republicans signed that into law, making people go to the bathroom associated with their birth gender. And then it was expanding Medicaid, which he did accomplish. And as Republicans will point out, they ultimately got on board too, just a couple years ago. So
yeah, but it was a decade-long pressure campaign from Roy Cooper on the GOP to finally approve Medicaid expansion.
Right. That's in a bit of an aside, but I thought I would throw that in there as sort of this disclaimer of I would think the Democrats would say Medicaid expansion was Cooper's signature accomplishment, although he'll say he'll of course take credit for all the businesses moving here too.
Yeah. Well, obviously it is not just Roy Cooper in the mix for vice president. We've heard names like Mark Kelly, the astronaut senator from Arizona, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. A lot of these folks are a little bit more moderate, white guys from swing states, all of which check a box that Kamala Harris, as a more liberal Californian, does not. So we don't know, obviously, exactly who will get picked, but we know that Cooper is certainly in the running. He and Harris have known each other for years, going back to the time, I think it was around 2010, that they overlapped as state attorneys general.
Right. They were both attorney generals. Cooper, we should say, was attorney general from 2001 to the end of 2016. And then Harris overlapped him when she was attorney general from 2011 to 2017.
Yeah. So pretty big period of time there. And, a lot of times those attorneys general will work with other states, to kind of band together and bring lawsuits as a group instead of, just going it alone. So there is actually a lot of, work that goes on, between the states and, working on whether it's antitrust or consumer protection things or more politically motivated lawsuits.
Right. And there are associations and conferences they go to as well, like Democratic attorney generals, whatever. I don't know the name off the top of my head. I'm sure it exists. But then there's, the National Association of Attorneys General and things like that.
Yeah. Yep. I will note here in North Carolina, not everyone is as rainbows and butterflies on everything with Kamala Harris as Roy Cooper has been since this VP news has started. We saw this week Representative Don Davis in the U.S. House, who represents northeastern North Carolina, really the only swing district in the state heading into 2024 elections, was one of just a small number of Democrats who voted with every single Republican on a very harshly worded resolution slamming both Biden and Harris on their immigration record. It calls Harris the border czar. It goes on it's like 4 pages of just a list of grievances on all of the things that Republicans and this small number of Democrats, including Don Davis, think that they have done wrong on the southern border, and concludes that their policies should not be allowed to continue into the future. So I reached out to Davis's office Thursday night after this vote came down and said, hey, so does that mean that you are opposing her for the presidency if you just signed this resolution that says we don't want these policies continuing on into the future under the next president? Did not hear back from his office immediately, but then Friday morning they put out a statement saying that Don Davis endorses Kamala Harris. So I don't know that I can necessarily take credit for that myself, but I have a feeling he got quite a few calls from folks who said, hey, what was that vote about? And where do you stand on Kamala Harris? So even though he's not happy with her record on immigration, he is backing her in general. On that note, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Mark Robinson news and about the State Board of Elections lawsuits. Stick around. And we are back on the wrap. Thank you for giving us your attention today. There has been quite a lot of movement in state politics as well. It is not all just national politics going on. There are 2 lawsuits at least out there against the State Board of Elections, and we saw this week that both the elections director and the chairman of the board were hauled in to a state legislative oversight hearing and subpoenaed. They were, made to testify under oath about some of their actions regarding both RFK Jr. and Cornel West. You've covered some of this. What is the complaint against the State Board of Elections here? Right.
Republicans are concerned that the State Board of Elections, which has 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, so it's Democrat-led, are sort of playing politics here by not letting Cornel West or his party, the Justice for All, or the Justice for All party, I believe it is, on the ballot. Now, and at first, they didn't let RFK Jr. on the ballot either, and for different reasons. RFK, with his group, the We the People Party, they were concerned that they had created a political party solely to subvert state law to get Robert Kennedy Jr. on the ballot. And
that's because if you're an independent candidate, you need like 83,000 signatures on a petition to get onto the ballot. But if you have a political party, you only need 14,000. So
that's right.
It's a huge bar to get on the ballot here as a candidate without a political party behind you.
That's right. So they during this hearing they questioned him like, "Oh, do you have other candidates? And what races?" And they found a script for some of Kennedy's volunteers that said something to the effect of, we're hoping to get Robert Kennedy on the ballot. And they said, well, hold on here. What about your other candidates? And so, and then with West, it was a different story. Cornel West's group had to answer questions about the legitimacy of their petition. And the reason for that is they opened up their petition documents to a wide swath of people, including Trump supporters who accessed them and took them to a Trump rally. In fact, there's a viral tweet or post on X, formerly Twitter, that a Washington Post reporter took where he documents a Trump supporter and, open and avowed Trump supporter asking someone to sign the petition for Cornel West. And so obviously during this board hearing, they're saying, how do we know that these people who want Cornel West on the ballot, who's notoriously liberal, and I believe at one point was the leader of the Democratic Socialists of America,
that's correct.
How do we know that that each of these signatures represents someone who shares his values? If your petition was open to people at Trump rallies and things like that, that doesn't line up. And so ultimately, RFK Jr. was allowed on the ballot. Cornel West's group was not. And the executive director of the North Carolina Board of Elections was pulled in and asked about that at the legislature.
Yeah, and, she said, both Karen Brinsonbell, who's the elections director, and also Alan Hirsch, who's the chairman of the board, defended this decision. They said, in addition to everything, that you just mentioned about the signatures with West, that there's actually a criminal investigation right now into potential fraud for some of the signatures for West. The state elections board cold called some of the folks who had signed these petitions for West and said, hey, we see your name on this ballot, tell us about that. And more than half of the people that they spoke to either said that they had no memory of ever signing a petition for West, or that they had been told that it was for like something else. And so There's actually a criminal investigation right now. The state board had reached out to some of the people who were involved in the signature gathering campaign, tried to subpoena them, got completely ignored. All the people that tried to subpoena just did not respond to them. So they said, basically, since there are these serious lingering issues about whether or not it was actual fraud that went into these ballots, not just, did people sign the petitions for politically motivated reasons, but, were some of the signatures illegitimate? That was why they denied them. Republicans, of course, aren't really inclined to believe that. There is a lawsuit out there by some of the people who did sign this petition and who do put themselves out there as being legitimate Cornel West supporters, say that they're being disenfranchised by not being able to join his party, not being able to vote for him on the ballot. But if you look at the list of lawyers who filed that lawsuit, it is like a who's who of GOP election law attorneys who always represent the Republican Party in any sort of election law case they have. And then today we also saw that House Speaker Tim Moore, one of the top Republicans, also filed an amicus brief in that lawsuit trying to get Cornel West on the ballot. So it's pretty clear that it's about politics. And I think Republicans would all say it's pretty clear that the decision to keep him off is about politics. So here you go. We're in election season and politics are afoot.
Right. And you may wonder, why are they putting so much effort into this? Well, in North Carolina in 2020, this state was decided by 1 percentage point or 75,000 votes. So the thinking here is, if you narrow the public's choices, then your odds of the voters voting for, Trump or Harris go up. But if you muddy the waters a little bit and throw in some Robert Kennedy Jr. and throw in some Cornel West, well, maybe they take away some votes for Harris.
Yeah, Cornel West obviously takes votes from Harris. I don't think there's a single person in the world who would be split between voting for maybe Trump or maybe Cornel West. I don't think that Venn diagram exists.
No,
but Robert F. Kennedy is a different story. Obviously, scion of the famous Kennedy family, that name still means a lot to Democratic voters, especially older Democratic voters. But a lot of his policies are a little bit more on the Republican side. And so when we've seen some polling, he does actually tend to pull from both Democrats and Republicans. And each poll is different. Sometimes he has 4% of the vote. Sometimes he has like 10% of the vote. So it's really hard to say exactly how much of an impact he would have. But yeah, in a state that's decided by 1% of the vote, whether it's 4 or 10% of the vote, that still could easily tip the scales one direction or another. Could even, change some things in the governor's race. Neither of these parties has put forward a candidate in the governor's race. But there are some third parties. The Green Party has a candidate. The Constitution Party has a candidate who was also recently approved by the State Board of Elections. The Libertarian Party has a candidate. One candidate in the governor's race who's been facing some scrutiny, well, not himself, but his wife, is Mark Robinson, the Republican nominee for governor. His wife ran a nonprofit called Balanced Nutrition until earlier this year. She ran it for about a decade until she shut it down. Had initially said she was shutting it down because of the campaign, that her husband was running for governor and needed to just, be with him full time. Well, it later came out that it was actually under state investigation. And the state now on Friday has come out and said that the nonprofit, which she founded and ran, owes $132,000 back to the government. Tell us about this.
That's right. And so there's just because she shut it down does not mean she's out of the woods. And we've reported on some of this. She owes the Department of Health and Human Services some explanations for her finances. And obviously they came up with this calculation of how much she owes. Now, she says it's politically motivated. Roy Cooper, the Democratic governor, appoints the leader of various departments, including the health department. So they claim that they're being picked on. But this story has been out there. This is not just something on WRAL's website. It's been picked up by various news outlets who have been asking Robinson and his wife about this for several months now. Well,
I mean, this was an issue even during the primary. There were some other Republicans who were hammering Robinson over this nonprofit that his wife ran because it was purely funded by the federal government, and they thought it was hypocritical for someone to be slamming big government spending at the same time that his family's source of income was government spending.
Right. And also, I believe we should put credit where it's due, I think, in terms of being on top of this story. There's a blog out there. It's a right-wing blog called The Daily Haymaker, and I've seen some of their work, and they're certainly not fans of me or you, I don't think.
They are not.
But they have been the ones to sort of, I think they, broke this story, if I'm not mistaken. But they've written a lot about it, and are some of the Robinson family's biggest critics.
Yeah, there's definitely, bipartisan critiques of all of this coming out. Now, we've reached out to both Robinson's campaign and his office for lieutenant governor, got, no comments from all of them. We've reached out to Yolanda Hill, his wife, and her attorney, Tyler Brooks. We've spoken with them in the past a little bit, but this week, ever since, the news started dropping about exactly how much money they owe, we have not been hearing back from them on our request for comments. So we will update those stories, of course, if we do hear back from them, but they still have about 2 weeks to appeal this decision or to pay the money back. I think that about covers it for state politics this week. Let us know if we missed anything, and if not, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.